Time for the last chapter of The Gospel According to Superman by John T. Galloway, Jr. Chapter 15 is titled Up, Up, and Away. It's a beautiful day. There's people out here mowing, but I thought it was time for me to read the last chapter, so. Up, Up, and Away. While I was in college, a tragedy occurred. George Reeves, who played the part of Superman in the TV series, was found dead. Now quite a bit can be said of my classmates, both positively and negatively. Reverence for the dead and dying, however, was not their long suit. A well-known figure would be reported on his or her deathbed, and students would be making bets as to the exact day. In the more elaborate booking circles, it was down to the hour at which the person might die. Needless to say, the tragic death of Mr. Reeves did not go without some pungent piece of Princeton profundity. "Superman is dead," they cried, in the library, in the dorm, by the good-humored truck. "Superman is dead." It was a remark of sarcastic wit making its own point, as we college boys did in those days, quite relevant to the age in which it was uttered. The absurdity of the Man of Steel, strange visitor from another planet, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. What saps we had been as little kids, being conned into worshipping that steel clown. We now had a chance to laugh at our past, our ridiculous dreams, and to assert in however trivial a way our emancipation from childhood. Anyhow, the Untouchables and Rocky the Flying Squirrel were better watching anyway, so I laughed along with them. Superman is dead. With a diploma under my arm, I crossed the street to what university students call the Angel Factory, more widely known as a theological seminary. To my dismay, I discovered in midstream that another tragedy had supposedly occurred. I don't recall where I was when I first got the news, or even how I took it. For some reason, it never shook me much. "God is dead," they were saying. In the library, in the dormitory, by the good-humor truck, even on the corner of Time, God is dead. Oddly, it felt like George Reeves revisited. All those seminary students were getting in their licks against the God of their Sunday school teachers, their youth fellowship leaders, even their ministers. It was a declaration of manhood, an emancipation from their God, so that now we can find our own. Many were saying that the old pie-in-the-sky God had to die so that the real, in-the-marketplace God could be discovered. Others were simply laughing at the whole idea of God as a relic from their childhood that had been outgrown. The 60s were ripe for that sort of thing. The early years of the decade set the pace. John Kennedy was elected president in 1960. His administration was characterized by the word he uttered so often in his Boston twang, "Viga." It was vigorous time, the confident hope that through human brains, compassion, and technology, any problem would be solved anywhere. Mr. Kennedy challenged science to go to the moon in 10 years. It was a seemingly impossible target that was nonetheless hit within the decade. Many of the goals of the Kennedy administration were achieved, including some of the most far-reaching pieces of civil rights legislation passed primarily under Lyndon Johnson. It was said that some of the Kennedy staff were hungry for crisis so that they could leap in and apply their know-how to work out a solution. From Selma to Saigon they searched. It was a day and age when the brilliant minds of our nation were stretching, perhaps as never before, from Cape Canaveral, where the rocket program was growing by leaps and firings, to California, where scientists were inviting young college students to act as guinea pigs for experiments with a new wonder drug, LSD. If we need a solution, man can find it. If we find something that works, use it. Never have we had such an orgy of self-confidence. Man can do all things through man. The shock of November 22, 1963 was doubtedly difficult. It killed our leader, with whom Americans felt an incredibly close relationship, and left a brave widow and a little boy saluting his father's coffin. It also put a needle right in the middle of our great big balloon. The trouble with hope is that it leads so easily to despair if it is vested in the wrong object. Man worshipping man as a hope doomed sooner or later to failure. The young people making headlines by joining the Peace Corps were, in just a few years, making headlines by taking over college buildings and protesting at the 1968 Democratic Convention. The black people marching in Washington to hear Dr. Martin Luther King speak were, in just a short time, to be rioting in the ghettos. Dr. King himself would die of an assassin's bullet. Hope became despair. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. In those glory years of the 60s, we still assume that man left to himself could solve all of his own problems. We obviously had no need for beings like Superman and God. Superman went because we did not need to project dream heroes. We had a fine enough dream going on right in the good old United States. God went for more complicated reasons. The projected God of popular religion died as the Man of Steel died. People did not need to dream of him anymore. Others found that their church was dying because it was worshiping a God who was interested in nothing but social action. Still others found it a nuisance and quite unnecessary to encounter an other in a time like this. In the late 60s, I considered writing about the Superman series and was told quite flatly that it was too late. Why bother, I was told. Whoever thinks of Superman these days? He is a thing of the past. I got the same impression in a seminary where God was held up in much the same way. What was left of him was out in the marketplace, or making human life more human, whatever that means. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a theologian of the hour, and with so many great minds, it is sometimes hard to separate what Bonhoeffer was actually saying, what his disciples insist he was trying to say. But two quotes are germane. He wrote, "God is no longer necessary as a working hypothesis." Most popular among us post-adolescents was the ditty, "Man has come of age." I am not certain whether Bonhoeffer really believed these little gems as statements, or in fact, if he had the wisdom to believe that this was merely the way modern man felt about himself. Since Bonhoeffer was held captive in a Nazi prison and finally hanged, I find it hard to imagine that he really meant that man had come of age, though I find it quite within the bounds of common sense for him to discern man as thinking himself to be of age. What else the nonsense of Hitler? The Anglican bishop John A.T. Robinson took the writings of Bonhoeffer, Paul Tillich, and Rudolf Bultmann and wrote the theology of the 60s in a little book entitled Honest to God, Quite Frankly. I found the book helpful. The gist of what the bishop was saying is that God is right here in the midst of human life, not at all an other as our Sunday school teachers tried to tell us. It was a helpful balance for a faith too much vested in the supernatural. A seminary student coming out of the angel factory in the mid-60s might well have chosen a funeral oration for God as his first sermon, and an offering up of mankind as the hope of the world for the second. After that, he would probably leave his pulpit and become a social worker. God and Superman were no longer necessary as working hypotheses. It is not without significance that when people begin to celebrate their own greatness, they project neither comic strip heroes nor pop religion gods. At the same time, they have an aversion to encountering the other. One might be willing to applaud, for theological reasons, the demise of pop religion, but the record is that the genuine encounter too often goes down with it. Pop religion is, after all, the manifestation of the fact that people are hungry. They are searching for something, a meaning, a directive, a fullness of life. The longing had been lodged in inadequate places. Pop religion is not enough. It is a perversion of the real encounter, but a wise reaper sees it as a sign that at least a harvest is possible. The problem of the great celebration of us that characterized the 60s is that it was a dead-end street. Have we ever had such high hopes throw us to such low depths? confident that the goodness of man could do all, heralding the good news that it is no longer matters what a man's religion is, snubbing the pre-intellectual 50s, we ended up in what one commentator called a national nervous breakdown. Even the great dream of people working together as brothers and sisters ended in a fiasco as young were set up against old, black against white, poor against rich, female against male. Admittedly, some of this is due to the emergence of groups too long held down. Only now getting into the decision-making process, I could rest comfortably with that were it not for the bitterness, the anger, and the despair and hopelessness that characterizes it all. I leave it to the historians in future decades to tell us exactly when the tide turned. At some point it began slowly to dawn that we had been traveling down the wrong path. Though we hate to admit it, the redneck had been at least half right. You cannot make people get along with each other by force of law. We cannot solve our problems on our own. Maybe it was Vietnam. Maybe it was civil disobedience. Maybe it was crime. Maybe it was drugs. Maybe it was the gradual awareness by the silent majority that those blasted hippies had to point to their antics. Whatever the cause, there has been a death to the death of Superman and the death of God movements. For a time it has been hard to tell if it is merely a death of a death, or in fact a resurrection. It now looks as though something new has arisen and is very much at work in our world. Evangelism is no longer a dirty word. We can talk about Bible study and kids will not get ill. Billy Graham can bring a crusade to town and the established church will not try to block it. In fact, they will work with it. It is a new day. Again, the Superman model is helpful. We find it in the ways the Man of Steel has returned that people are not ready to leap back into the style of the 40s and 50s. He is not appearing through his former media. Rather, his presence is more diffuse. He is into a little bit of everything. Commercials, cocktail party banter, costumes at dress-up time. So with God, established religion is still in trouble. The main denominations of the post-war years are not booming. The mad dash to erect new edifices has turned rather abruptly into concern about how to pay for the ones we have already built and now stuck with. Church attendance and membership have tapered off, and opinion surveys reveal that the authority of the church has tumbled. The renewed or revived spirit blowing across Christendom has not caused a flood of saints to inundate the established churches any more than the return of Superman is sending us all back to our radios and comic book shelves. Instead, we see the Spirit at work in new forms. If the mainline denominations are barely holding their own, the sects are booming. Sects, S-E-C-T-S, are booming. Groups whose names were unheard of a decade ago are constantly starting new churches or putting additions on the ones they have. Some might raise their eyebrows at this practice, except that the sects are filling those buildings almost as soon as they complete them and are paying off the mortgage promptly. The Spirit is at work in living rooms, on living corners, on college campuses. Who would have thought it in 1968? We were discovering that a new openness has emerged between the established church and the extra ecclesiastical ministries. Youth organizations like Young Life or Campus Crusade were at first vigorously opposed by clergymen who were afraid that these outfits would rob them of their youth groups. Gradually, in the late 60s, these churchmen faced two realities. One, they did not have youth groups anyway, and two, parents were calling up frantic, wanting guidance about how to get Junior off drugs. The clergyman had no answer to that, and he could see that the youth movements leading kids to Christ did have an answer. We are living in a great time. The Spirit is at work in many wonderful ways. Maybe we are like alcoholics who need to hit bottom before we are willing to be able to ask for help. In Western civilization, we are beginning to ask, and God is answering. We are returning in faith to God, to Jesus, to religion. This book has been written with the firm conviction that now is the time to open ourselves to the other as he comes to us in Scripture and in Jesus Christ. It is time to receive him on his terms rather than ours. We have had enough of our terms in recent years. Now it is his turn. In this period when people are searching, when people are hungry, in this time when my phone, like that of many other clergymen, is ringing with lives looking for something, we are in the presence of great danger and great possibility. People are projecting again. The God that is being bandied about by many today is a superficial figment of human wishes and dreams. The God of pop religion, the God of projection, is back, but that in itself does not scare me. It means that the time is right. People are ready for an encounter with the living God, the other, who can remake the lives of us all. And then we have the end, and then we have credit lines and a couple blank pages, and we are finished reading the Gospel according to Superman. Thanks for reading along with me. I might read something next. I don't know yet.